You have a full battery, no excuses. The day is open, the task is simple, and every rational part of you knows exactly what you need to do. And yet, you don't move. Minutes pass, then an hour. You're not tired. You're not distracted. You just can't start. And the longer you sit there, the more a quiet, creeping shame begins to fill the space where your motivation should be. Most people call that laziness. Science calls it something far more disturbing. What's happening inside your brain in those frozen moments isn't a personality flaw. It isn't weakness. It's a biological war, and it's being fought without your permission. Below the level of your awareness, in a region of your brain that most people will never hear about, a region that is quietly deciding, right now, whether you are worth the cost of moving. Deep in the prefrontal architecture of the human brain sits a structure called the Anterior Cingulate Cortex. Neuroscientists used to think of it as a simple error detection system, a mental alarm that fires when something goes wrong. But the more they studied it, the more unsettling its real function became. The Anterior Cingulate Cortex isn't just detecting errors. It's running calculations, constantly. On every single action you consider taking, it is measuring the metabolic cost of that action against the neurochemical reward it expects to receive. It is, in the most literal, biological sense, your brain's internal accountant, and it is staggeringly conservative. Here is what that means for you. When you sit down to start a task, even a simple one, your anterior cingulate cortex doesn't just say, go. It evaluates. It weighs the cognitive glucose required to shift your neural state, the norepinephrine needed to break your current mental pattern. The dopaminergic reward it predicts will come on the other side. And if the numbers don't balance, if the projected effort exceeds the anticipated return, it vetoes the move before you ever consciously decide anything. The paralysis you feel isn't emotional, it's neurochemical arithmetic, and you are not in the room when the decision gets made. But this is where the science gets deeply unsettling. Researchers studying task initiation discovered something that rewrote the way we understand procrastination. It isn't about time management. It isn't about discipline. It's about a specific biological threshold, a kind of neurological ignition that must be crossed before thinking can convert into doing. And the gap between those two states is not metaphorical. It is physical. It costs energy. Real, measurable metabolic energy. Your brain must fire a precise surge of norepinephrine to break neural inertia, essentially forcing a transition between two incompatible cognitive states. Without that surge, the thought of doing the thing and the act of doing the thing remain permanently separated. You can plan forever. You will never begin. And the cruelest part, having energy, physical stamina, a rested body, a clear mind, does almost nothing to close that gap, because the friction isn't in your muscles. It isn't in your sleep debt or your caffeine levels. It lives in a loop of competing neural signals that your brain generates when it cannot commit to a direction. Official studies confirmed something no one wanted to believe. The first 60 seconds of beginning a new task consume more cognitive glucose than the next hour of sustained deep work. The startup cost is enormous. Your brain knows this, and it protects you from paying it, whether you asked it to or not. Think about what that means. Every morning you wake up intending to do something that matters. Your brain is quietly inflating the perceived price of starting, not because the task is hard, but because transition itself is metabolically expensive. The ancient neural circuitry that evolved to conserve energy doesn't distinguish between a life-threatening physical exertion and opening a document on your laptop. To the anterior cingulate cortex, activation is activation. Cost is cost, and your brain defaults, always, to the cheaper option. This is why the standard advice fails. Just start. Push through. You'll feel better once you begin. These instructions are being delivered to the conscious mind of someone whose unconscious brain has already decided not to move. You are trying to overwrite a neurochemical calculation with willpower, and willpower is downstream of the very system that's blocking you. What actually works? What neuroscientists have begun to map in recent years involves something quieter, smaller, a way of tricking the anterior cingulate cortex by lowering its perceived cost of entry. Micro-movements, environmental pre-signals, sensory cues that cause the brain to pre-allocate dopamine for a transition before the transition happens. not discipline, misdirection. You don't force the engine to start. You warm it up without it knowing, but even that knowledge carries a shadow underneath it, because if your brain can be tricked into starting, if the line between frozen and moving is just a matter of neurochemical staging, then the question quietly emerges about every choice you've made, every goal you've abandoned, every morning you've lost to the weight of almost beginning. Were those failures of character? Or were they simply moments when the biological ignition never fired and no one told you that was even possible? And if it can fail without you knowing, how would you ever know when it's failing right now?